Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. FPL Consult here. Now Game Week 6 is going to be a very popular wildcard window. Many FPL managers have already activated their wildcards, but I know there are a bunch of you guys thinking about whether to wildcard in Game Week 7 instead because your team for Game Week 6 looks pretty much alright. So in today's video, we are going to explore a Game Week 6 wildcard as well as a Game Week 7 wildcard, look at the differences, which a bit of a spoiler is that there really isn't too much of a difference in terms of the players you'd go for, but really it's about the fixtures that you'd get now in Game Week 6 versus those you'd get in Game Week 7 that will kind of be the difference. So in today's video, we'll explore all of this. If you guys do enjoy this video, please do drop a like, please do subscribe as well. Before we start this video, I want to just take a short moment here to thank all of you guys, every single one of you, for helping the channel hit 9,000 subscribers. We just hit this milestone on yesterday's video, which is the ultimate wildcard video. So thank you all so much for the support. It's been almost 3 years now that this channel has been active, so I am very thankful for all of the support that I've received along this journey, and I do hope that we can continue to press on for 10k subscribers. That will be the next goal, and it begins now. So please do subscribe if you'd like to support the channel and me as well on this creator journey. Alright, so we'll start today's video with the kind of fixture perspective of wildcard 6 versus a wildcard 7, because choosing to wildcard now or one game week later will entail different things. So let's break it down in terms of the 5 different teams that we have here on screen today. So the first one is Liverpool. In Game Week 6, they have Wolves away. In Game Week 7, they have Crystal Palace away. From Game Week 8 onwards as well, the fixtures start to get quite bad. So you can argue that from Game Week 7 onwards, that is when their bad fixture run starts. But I do think like now in Game Week 6, we are probably one game week early in dropping Liverpool assets. The reason why I say dropping is simply because of the first point we have here, where a wildcard in Game Week 6 will lose Liverpool assets for the Wolves game. Now you won't lose all of them. Arguably, you can hold on to Trent. You can even have a Luis Diaz on your Game Week 6 wildcard. But I think the main exclusion on the Game Week 6 wildcard is Mohamed Salah. It will be quite tricky to fit in players like Saka, Haaland, a couple of premium defenders, and then try to have Salah in the team as well. So he will be the main exclusion. You won't have him for the Wolves game. And the converse is then true for the wildcard in Game Week 7, where you get to keep Salah for the Game Week 6 fixture against Wolves. And then after that, in Game Week 7, you can sell him when you're on the wildcard. So that is with respect to Liverpool. Now moving on to the Arsenal fixtures here. In Game Week 6, it's Leicester at home. Game Week 7, it's Southampton at home. In Game Week 8, it's Bournemouth away. So this is the block of 3 fixtures that are really good for Arsenal. And I think this is when people will want to triple up on them as well. So the thing about a Game Week 6 wildcard is that you will be able to get your ideal Arsenal triple up. Whether that is double defense or double attack, you will be able to choose. But those on a Game Week 7 wildcard, because you're delaying it by 1 week, I do feel like there will be a couple of you guys finding it hard to triple up on Arsenal in Game Week 6, because we are just coming off the Man City game in Game Week 5, where people were mass selling Arsenal assets because of that City fixture. So it depends in this situation how many Arsenal assets you have. If you have 2 Arsenal assets currently, say for example you have Saka and Gabriel as well, you held them through the Man City fixture, then this point won't apply to you. You probably just need 1 free transfer to get up to 3 Arsenal assets, in which case you can genuinely consider whether you want to use it in Game Week 7 instead. Right, so but I think for the general kind of template team right now, you probably don't have a lot of Arsenal players, and therefore I do think like you probably need to wildcard in Game Week 6 to get the ideal Arsenal triple up. If not, you wildcard in Game Week 7, but you forego having 3 Arsenal players in Game Week 6. So moving on to Man City now. In Game Week 6, it's Newcastle away. In Game Week 7, it's Fulham at home. And the fixtures after that are really good for Man City. So actually, their real good fixture run starts in Game Week 7. I'll start off by saying that the Newcastle away game technically is not super difficult, looking at how Newcastle are playing at the moment. The official FPL ticker is something that we generally can't rely on. But yeah, Newcastle away, not a super difficult fixture, but definitely more tricky than Fulham at home. Now, I do think like for a wildcard in Game Week 6, you may need to play your Man City assets against Newcastle. Now, this may not be a bad thing at all, but what I'm trying to say here is I do think on a Game Week 6 wildcard, you may have more than one Man City asset. Haaland may not be the only asset you have. I do think like because the fixtures are so good from Game Week 7 onwards, you may want to have Vardio, for example, or Savinho in midfield, in which case you likely have to play them against Newcastle in Game Week 6. The difference then for a Game Week 7 wildcard is that you can avoid the Newcastle away fixture, and then you can obviously load up on Man City assets because Game Week 7 is when their good fixture run starts. You could even go so far as to triple up on Man City in Game Week 7. So I do think that is the kind of difference between a wildcard in Game Week 6 and 7 with respect to Man City. Now for Brentford, honestly, I don't think there's too much difference whether you wildcard in 6 or 7. The main player you would be targeting is Bryan Mbeumo. Now in Game Week 6, there's West Ham at home, and in Game Week 7, there's Wolves at home for Brentford. So technically, by wildcarding in Game Week 6, you get Brentford assets against West Ham. I'd assume that whether you are on a wildcard or not, you'll probably bring in Bryan Mbeumo for this West Ham game. So I do think like maybe a defensive asset or a second Brentford attacker is what we're talking about here. On a wildcard in Game Week 6, maybe you can include the second Brentford asset against West Ham. On a Game Week 7 wildcard, then you probably miss out having this second Brentford player. But I do think like it's not the end of the world. Like honestly, you can just bring them in from Game Week 7 onwards and their fixture run is still very good from then on. So I don't think it's too much of a difference missing out on the West Ham at home game for Brentford. Now, as for Fulham, in Game Week 6 they have Nottingham Forest away. In Game Week 7 you have Man City away for Fulham. So I think in terms of a Game Week 6 wildcard, you will lose the Fulham assets for this Forest game. Now, Forest have been defending pretty good recently, but they did concede 2 goals against Brighton. So I do think they are defense that could be gotten at if a team plays well. And Fulham have been playing pretty well. They just won Newcastle 3-1. So I do think like if you're looking at your team and you have Emil Smith-Rowe and you're in a position where you want to keep him for the Nottingham Forest game, it's not the worst decision in the world at all. I do think like on a wildcard in Game Week 6, you won't have these Fulham assets. So that is one of the downsides for a wildcard in Game Week 6. And obviously the converse then is true. If you wildcard one game week later, you get the Fulham assets for this Nottingham Forest game, and then you sell them in Game Week 7 when they have Man City away. So I think in terms of these different teams that we've just discussed, what I would do is take a look at the fixtures here, analyze them a little bit, and take a look at how many players you have from each of these teams before you decide whether you're willing to compromise on the fixtures in Game Week 6 and then just save the wildcard and do it in Game Week 7 instead, or you feel like your team is not optimized for these Game Week 6 fixtures such that you need to go out and use the wildcard. So I think it's not a straightforward decision. Unfortunately, I have to say it again, but it is very team dependent. So don't go with the crowd. Make your own decision as to whether you think a wildcard in 6 or 7 is better for your team, and then we go ahead with it. So now that we've had a look at the fixtures in detail, I want to zoom out a little bit and talk a bit about other things to consider in your decision-making process when you are deciding whether to wildcard in Game Week 6 or in Game Week 7. So the first 2 points here are questions I would ask myself if I'm on the fence. So the first question is, how much do you value keeping Liverpool assets against Wolves? Because as I've mentioned just now in the previous section, this is the compromise for a Game Week 6 wildcard. I won't have Mo Salah against Wolves. But the thing is, are you able, or do you think you will be able to cover this Mo Salah against Wolves fixture with the other players in your team? If you do think so, then you can wildcard in Game Week 6. If you don't, then you can keep Mohamed Salah in Game Week 6 and then sell him on a Game Week 7 wildcard instead. So I would question how much you value keeping Liverpool assets against Wolves. Next up, I would also ask myself, how many Arsenal assets do I currently own? If I have 2 Arsenal assets and I only need 1 transfer to get to 3, I may actually really consider going on a Game Week 7 wildcard instead, because I'm already almost tripled up on Arsenal. And the converse then is true, where if I'm looking at 0 Arsenal assets, for example, or only 1, and I want to triple up on them, then I think a wildcard in Game Week 6 is technically what will help me get there easier and also fix the issues elsewhere as well. So I want to go on the next point here by discussing about the Game Week 6 and Game Week 7 draft in a big picture view. So I do think like both drafts will not be too different in terms of the players you pick and also in terms of the teams you're targeting, it generally looks the same. Later on, we will discuss a gameweek 6 wildcard and we will also discuss a gameweek 7 wildcard. But you will see that generally it does not make too much of a difference. I think it's more about, as we just discussed, the fixtures that you will miss out on depending on whether you wildcard in gameweek 6 or in gameweek 7. Now, the other last 2 points here that I have, just simply a couple of general wildcard kind of thinking. So the potential loss on the team value for wildcard 7 is something you need to think about. There will be price rises and quite a bit of that in game week 6 we've already seen. So I would try to make the decision sooner rather than later, activate it as early as possible, and then you can take advantage of the price changes. But again, if you delay it to game week 7, then you risk potentially losing out on quite a bit of team value later on. Now, the last point I have here is that a wildcard in Game Week 7 will obviously have one more week of information on the Game Week 6 wildcard. This will be quite valuable. A lot of things can happen. Players can get injured. So I do think like it is worth considering as well that on a Game Week 7 wildcard, you will have an additional 1 week of information. So there we go with the Wildcard 6 and Wildcard 7 discussion. Let me know down in the comments below, are you on the fence? And if you are, where are you leaning towards? There's no real one answer fits all kind of a situation. This is a tricky decision that needs to be made this game week. So let me know where you stand. I'll be interested to know. It is a pretty big debate in Game Week 6 now. If not, let's take a look at the Game Week 6 draft. So in terms of a Game Week 6 wildcard, this is where I'm at. This is my latest wildcard draft. Now the thing is, I did upload an early wildcard draft in Game Week 6, but as I've said, a lot of things can be learned. The wildcard draft will continue to change as we go day by day. So I have made a couple of changes since then. So let's talk through these kind of changes as well as a big picture view. So looking at the team in general first, I still have obviously triple Arsenal. I still do back double Arsenal defense over double Arsenal attack. So I have Raya, Gabriel here as my double defense. And then I have Saka here. Now, again, I think yesterday we did see Arsenal and in the Arsenal and Man City game that Saka got hooked at halftime. But I don't think that is due to an injury. That one was because it was a defensive move by Arteta to kind of park the bus simply because they were down to 10 men. So I was quite surprised that Saka was the one that gave way there and not Martinelli, but I think the thinking behind that is probably that they wanted more speed on the counter-attack. So I would say in a general kind of a game week, I don't think Saka's minutes are at risk at all. So he's still a safe pick to go for, and this would be the triple up from Arsenal that I choose. Now in terms of defenders, I have Trent and Vardiol. So as I've said about the kind of Liverpool versus Wolves game, I do still want Trent here. And in fact, I do think I don't mind keeping him for at least the next 4 to 5 game weeks as well, because the upside with him is really good. We did see him come through in game week 5 with an attacking return as well as a clean sheet, so double-digit haul for him there. So I do think there's still value in investing 7 million into Trent. He is 1 million more expensive than Robertson, but I think it's worth spending that money there. So I've gone for him in defense. For Vardiol here, as I've mentioned, you probably need to start your second Man City asset in Game Week 6, and this is pretty much what I've done. And I do think like he is someone that I would have, whether I wildcard in Game Week 6 or Game Week 7, because the fixtures from Game Week 7 onwards are just so good. So I have to start him here against Newcastle away. I do think like you could argue I can start Pinnock against West Ham, who's on my bench right now. But I think the chances of Man City keeping a clean sheet against Newcastle, I would favour it a bit more than Pinnock keeping a clean sheet against West Ham, at least for now. So that's where I'm at in terms of my 3 defenders. In midfield, it's Mbeumo, Semenyo, Luis Diaz and Saka. So I don't think I need to justify Mbeumo. He's a lock on the Game Week 6 wildcard. First few names that I put in. So I think in terms of the other 2 players, I have Semenyo and Luis Diaz. So let's talk about Semenyo first. He's really cheap, 5.5 million. Probably will rise to about 5.6 by the time the Game Week 6 deadline comes around. But I do think like you saw in Game Week 5 how he played against Liverpool and how lethal he can be in the attack. And against Southampton, against Leicester, which are the next 2 fixtures for him, I do think like he could profit quite a bit there. So Semenyo is here in the Game Week 6 wildcard draft. Next, beside him there's Luis Diaz. Wolves away, again as I've said, I think it's a plump fixture for Liverpool. Granted that I did say in Game Week 7 as well, it's Crystal Palace away. After that the fixtures also start to get tricky. But Luis Diaz is playing so well that I think he could be good value. depending on the minutes he gets, of course, because there's always a risk that he doesn't start and maybe Gakpo comes in. But the way that he's playing right now is so good that I don't mind taking a bit of a risk with him, spending that 7.8, 7.9 million on him, and thereafter, getting this Wolves away fixture and seeing, assessing the next few game weeks how he does and whether I want to keep him or not. So starting with Luis Diaz here. On the bench as my fifth midfielder, I have Morgan Rogers, who has a really good fixture against Ipswich. So ideally I want to start him, but I really have 7 good attackers already. So I think something I could consider is dropping Calvert-Lewin to João Pedro, and then in that case, because João Pedro has Chelsea in game week 6, I can bench João Pedro and then start Morgan Rogers instead. So it is something I'm thinking about, but in terms of Morgan Rogers as a pick, I still think at 5.1 to 5.2 million, he is the one to go for. He's played 90 minutes in every game so far this season. It seems as if he is starting to click as well. He's getting the returns, so patience is paid off with him. And the data has been good since game week 1. So I like that Morgan Rogers offers security of minutes and also plays for a decent enough attacking team. So he's here on the bench. I think he justifies that spot. Now in the forward line, I have Wood, Haaland and Calvert-Lewin. So Haaland, I don't need to discuss him much. He's a lock on the game week 6 wildcard as well. Fixtures from game week 7 onwards are really good, so I have to have him and probably captain him for most weeks as well. It's Chris Wood and Calvert-Lewin that I've chosen here. So to speak about Chris Wood, it seems as if now he's on penalties. We saw it in game week 5. He took the penalty instead of Morgan Gibbs-White. So that was a surprise. I think a lot of us were unsure as to who was on penalties. But with Chris Wood now confirming that he's on penalties, and on top of that, fixtures moving forward with Nottingham Forest are not too bad at all. Attackingly, they have been playing pretty well of late too. So Chris Wood here, he's not a lock for sure, but I do like what he offers. And so he's in the game week 6 wildcard draft. Now for Calvert-Lewin, again, security of minutes with him. I know that whenever he's fit, he'll start. Seems like he's been fit for majority of the season so far. And Everton attackingly have been playing pretty alright. I don't mind the Everton attack. The Everton defense then is a different story. And Calvert-Lewin is also on penalties. So I do like it that the fixtures for Everton are really good. And Calvert-Lewin is really cheap. So having 2 cheap forwards here as well as other enablers in the midfield regions, for example, allows for a pretty expensive draft elsewhere in terms of having a full premium defense that you've seen here, as well as Saka and Haaland. Now, moving on to the bench, I have Fabianski as the backup keeper, 4.0 million. And then I have Rogers, Pinnock and Greaves. So I spoke about Rogers already. For Pinnock, I do think like the fixtures again for Brentford are really good. They're top of the fixture ticker. So I do think like if there is a couple of weeks I need to rotate them with players like Vardiol or Gabriel in poor fixtures, then Pinnock is someone I could utilize. And then Greaves as well is just a 4.0 bench fodder that I've gone for. Really good fixtures for Ipswich coming up. I doubt I would need to use him, but if I do need to, I don't mind it because their fixtures are good. So there we go on a Game Week 6 wildcard. This is where I am at the moment. Again, subject to a lot of change. I will continue to update you guys as well. But this is how a Game Week 6 wildcard could look like. And let me just show you guys now the Game Week 7 wildcard and the minor changes that I would make if I was to wildcard in Game Week 7 instead. So looking at a Game Week 7 wildcard draft, you will realize that it's not too different from a Game Week 6 wildcard. After all, you're only wildcarding one game week later and still targeting the same teams and the same players. So I'll speak specifically about the players that I've swapped out. So I don't have Trent in this draft. I've missed the Wolves game already, and now in Game Week 7 is technically when their bad fixture run starts. Crystal Palace away for Trent is not the most difficult fixture, but from Game Week 8 onwards, it does start to look quite bad. So I've chosen to go for Pedro Porro here in his position. Brighton away, you can argue, is not the easiest fixture, but looking at the next few game weeks, comparing Spurs fixtures against Liverpool's fixtures, I prefer Porro. Of course, his attacking threat is really good. So Porro here in the draft in place of Trent. Other changes that I've made, especially in midfield here, is Savinho and Bowen in for Semenyo and Luis Diaz. So again, without the Wolves game and the fixtures looking tricky for Luis Diaz, I prefer Jarrod Bowen here. Ipswich at home in Game Week 7. Now, I think this West Ham pick here could turn a bit of heads because they've been playing quite poorly of late. So if you don't want to go for Jarrod Bowen, you can find money elsewhere. You can definitely consider other players here. But I don't think Luis Diaz is a must include on a Game Week 7 wildcard. So I put Bowen here instead. Now, in terms of Semenyo, in game week 7, this is when he has his second good fixture. Because I did say in the game week 6 draft that Semenyo has Southampton in game week 6, and in game week 7 he has Leicester. But after the Leicester game, in game week 8, 9 and 10, it gets tricky for Semenyo. So on a game week 7 wildcard, I may just do without Semenyo, lose the Leicester fixture, which I don't mind, and then go for Savinho here, take advantage of the Man City fixture run from game week 7 onwards. Obviously, the usual caveats apply with regards to Man City assets in that they are always a minute's risk. But I think Savinho so far this season, whenever he has been fit at least, he has started the games. And he's looked pretty decent as well. He got an assist in game week 5 against Arsenal. So Savinho here, for his price, 6.5 million, pretty cheap. I have him here as my third City asset, if you realize, because I did say from game week 7 onwards, the Man City fixture run gets really good, that we can go so far as to triple up on them. So that's what I've done here with Savinho, Vardiol and Haaland. Now, in terms of the forwards, the only change I've made is Chris Wood out for Solanke. Chris Wood has Chelsea away in game week 7. And I think, again, that I've mentioned, Tottenham's fixtures are really good from game week 8 onwards at least. This Brighton away game, potentially they could get something, but the real thinking here is a longer term view. So I have Solanke here. It's more expensive than Chris Wood, but the extra money that has come from dropping Trent down to Porro will be able to fund this Chris Wood up to Solanke move with a longer term view in mind. So Solanke makes this draft. And honestly, that's pretty much it for the starting 11. The only other difference that I've gone for here on the bench, you will see Vandenberg instead of Pinnock to save a bit of money there to afford the slightly more expensive players in this draft. But if not, as I said, it's pretty much the same, not too different as well. A couple of changes here and there, maybe more Spurs players, less Liverpool players, and a Man City triple up. Aside from that, the other kind of locked players stay the same in that you have triple Arsenal, you have Haaland, you have Mbeumo, you have a couple of cheap enablers like Calvert-Lewin, Rodgers on the bench, etc. So I do think, like, again, not too much difference, but really it's about the fixtures you'll be compromising in game week 6 versus those you get in game week 7 that we discussed about at the start of this video. So hopefully this video helps you guys to narrow down which game week you want to wildcard. It is, of course, better to make a decision as soon as possible so that you can take advantage of price changes during this week. But it could be quite tricky. I do know that you guys are quite on the fence as well. So let me know down in the comments below where you are standing if you are on the fence. Are you leaning towards a Game Week 6 wildcard or a Game Week 7 wildcard? And I hope this video helped you guys in your decision making process. If you did enjoy this video, please do drop a like. Please do subscribe as well. And once again, thank you all so much for 9,000 subscribers. It means the world to me that you guys support me on this journey. So I thank you so much once again. And I will see you guys in more Game Week 6 content coming very soon. Bye bye.